All right. 9 o'clock. Welcome, everyone, to the City of Hutchinson City Council meeting for August 20th, 2019. Welcome, and thanks for coming in. Please call the roll.
Deckent.
Here.
Daveline.
Here.
Soldner. Pyros de Carvalho.
Here.
Inskeep.
Here.
Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Morning, Kim.
I invite you to pray with me. God of provisions, you are our rock and salvation. Remind us today that in the midst of life's challenges, when the earth rumbles beneath our feet, you are our strong foundation. Your faithfulness and guidance helps us each day. Today, Lord, direct our leaders and this meeting so that needs and resources can be matched and creative ways of growth can flourish. All this we ask in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Kim. Next item, please.
Item 4, oral communications from the audience.
Perfect. Portion of the meeting where we invite those from the audience to come up to speak to the council on things that are not on the agenda. If you'd be willing to do so, step to the podium, announce yourself, your organization, or your address, and limit your remarks to 5 minutes or so. Good morning.
Good morning. How you guys doing?
Good. Thank you for the flyer.
Well, yeah, thank you. Patrick Avila from the Hutchinson Arts Center. This is Ann Sellers, the president of the board from the Hutchinson Arts Center. And I just passed out the postcards to everybody, and I wanted to invite the council, the mayor, to our 70th anniversary, which is Friday, August 23rd. And I also wanted to say thank you for the license agreement to put out the sculpture. So the 70th anniversary will start at 5 to 8, and at 5:30 we'll do the unveiling for the Mike Livingston sculpture, which, again, thank you for letting us put that out. And we'll have a toast, we'll have champagne, we'll have a DJ, and cupcakes and things like that. So I just wanted to come up and say thank you for all your support, and hopefully everybody can make it. So
we're always down for a good dance.
yeah,
That's right.
So it should be fun. So, Ann, did
Thank
you?
you. No, it's going to be a great event, and so happy we've been here for 70 years, and I think we'll be here a lot longer.
It looks like the weather will temper a little bit by.
I hope so.
It
Friday.
doesn't matter. It's going to be a
doesn't-
great
it'll be
event.
good anyway.
Yeah, rain or shine.
All right.
We've
There
been
we
waiting a
go.
whole year to do this, so it should be fun.
Yeah,
Thank
we're
you, guys.
excited for
Thank
it.
you.
Thank you.
And I could add, that's become a hopping little spot. I was there last Thursday. I know I saw Steve and others there. And that little section of Washington and 5th is just really a fun place to be and hang out. So, very good. Anybody else want to speak to the council at this point? Something that's not on the agenda. Apparently there's enough on the agenda to talk about, so we'll move on to the next item, please.
Item 5, consent agenda.
I move we approve the consent agenda.
Second. Double second.
Been moved and seconded. Please call the roll.
Deckent.
Yes.
Daveline.
Yes.
Pyros de Carvalho.
Yes.
Inskeep.
Yes. Next item, please.
Item 6, a public hearing to consider adoption of the 2020 budget.
I would move to open the public hearing.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Please call the roll.
Deckent.
Yes.
Daveline.
Yes.
Pyros de Carvalho.
Yes.
Inskeep.
Yes.
John Deerdoff, City Manager. We're going to pull up my PowerPoint here real quick for
Very
me,
good.
I think. Unless I'm supposed to do something. But Mayor Council, what I thought I might do is just take a few minutes during this public hearing to just provide a kind of a quick overview of the proposed 2020 budget and a little bit about how we got to where we are today. So, and I apologize for the little numbers. They look bigger when I looked at them in the office, but the proposed budget as it stands today does call for a slight increase in our mill levy of about 0.288 mills. You'll recall the budget that you were given in early July proposed a mill increase of 1 mill, and through discussions over the past several weeks, the council lowered that down to 0.288 mill increase. So looking at the assessed valuation that we used to prepare this year's budget actually decreased by about 0.69% from last year's figure. Last year, you can see from the graph here, if you can read that, we were at just over 310 million. This year's assessed valuation dropped down to 307.8 million. And looking at this graph over the years, you can see we've always seen incremental increases in our assessed valuation. And so this is a little bit of a change for us to actually see that decrease. So with the 0.28 mil increase, our 2020 budget will generate exactly the same amount of property taxes that we generated last year. And again, even with the slight increase in the mill levy, we're still going to be working with the same amount of property taxes last year. And I think that's an important point that needs to be made, and something I know we talked about during the study sessions that we had. So just a quick look at our revenue side of things. The big three that we always talk about: sales tax, property tax, and franchise fees. Sales tax represents the biggest piece of our revenue source at 36%, and then property tax in at 34%, followed by franchise tax at 14%. So again, our revenue sources are fairly limited, obviously, to these big three. In 2020, we actually increased our projected sales tax about 2%, which is really relatively flat based on how we've been doing so far this year and what happened last year. So very small increase there. On the expense side, overall, our expenses in the general fund for 2020 are about just under 1%, 0.88% higher than they were last year. So 2020 total general fund 35.3 million, and the 2019 general fund was 35 million. So again, general fund represents the basic core services of the city: public safety, parks, facilities, planning, zoning, streets, administration. And so it gives you just a picture there. And one thing I would point out there, you can see the biggest portion of our budget, we've talked about that many times, is our personnel, our people, and that represents 68, almost 70% of our total budget. And that's pretty much been the norm. I think that's pretty common for most public entities to be that side of it as far as the personnel cost related to the total budget. So this graph here basically reflects our spending versus our revenues, and the picture you see here certainly is not perfect because it does show some structural imbalance. We've been talking about this for many years, and I think back to 2011 when we did make some real progress on this, where we approved a budget where our revenues actually equaled our expenses. And that was a good thing, but obviously we haven't been able to do that every year. As you look at the 2020 budget, this graph on the far right, you can see that there is a budget gap of about $486,000, which means we're spending more than the revenue that we're going to generate in that year. And we've been able to do that or balance our budget with the fund balance, and we've talked a lot about that. The 2019 budget gap was $387,000. In 2018, we actually approved a budget that had a $785,000 gap. But as typical, and we've talked a lot about this, we would expect most of that to vanish once we get year end and we show our actual expenses. And I would just reflect that and illustrate that when you look at 2018, when I said we had a $785,000 gap. At the end of the year, we actually had a positive of $935,000. So just gives you an idea. We've talked about not spending all of our line items. We've got savings in personnel through vacancies and what have you. And then, of course, our fund balance is always there as well. So wanted to point this out. This really kind of talks about fund balance. And, we've talked about our fund balance for some time. We've talked about our policies and kind of where we want to be. Last year, during the 2019 budget process, the council discussed in depth, where do we want our fund balance to be? And we kind of set on a policy recommendation from the GOFA, the Government Officers Finance Association, a National Association of Municipal Finance Directors. And basically their recommended policy was 2 months of operating expenses. And so in our case, that would put us right around 6.2, above $6 million for a fund balance based on that policy. And again, that's a policy, that's a goal. our projected 2019 year-end balance, you can see that the far right, the second number from the right in the dark blue down there, our projected fund balance is right at $4.6 million. And then, again, we expect that to be higher once we end the year. And then our 2020 projection is 4.2. So, but again, you know, while we're not meeting our goal, I think our fund balances where we're at right now are solid. We've compared to other cities of our size, and I think we're in really pretty good shape there. But I've always been a big believer in having strong fund balances. It helps you in a lot of ways in terms of expenses coming up. It helps us with our bond ratings, those kinds of things. So that's something that I think the council will want to continue to work on as we go forward. So just a couple highlights on the expense side. Wages. Our 2020 budget does have included in the budget a 3.5% merit pool, which is probably one of the biggest merit pools that we've had in several years. And, you know, attracting and retaining quality employees is not just an issue that the public sector deals with. We talk about that a lot, but it's something that we're dealing with each and every day. And for us to be able to attract good police officers, firefighters, not only attract them, but retain them, you know, street workers, water maintenance workers, sewer maintenance workers, park employees, we've got to have a competitive wage and we've got to have competitive benefits. And I think this wage package that we're offering this year really sets us in that right direction. So a couple other comments there. Just really we looked at our pay ranges based on a comp study where we used appropriate benchmark cities. We did the formal study back in 2016. HR conducted their internal study this year. And so there were several pay ranges that were increased, the minimum and the maximums by 1.5%. On the health insurance side, we're projecting a 6% increase for health insurance in 2020. Once we had the budget proposed, I think the trends we got from our carrier was more like 7.2%, but we're fine with where we're at the 6% increase. So.
John, can I interrupt you a minute?
Sure.
And if you take a moment for the benefit of the general public to explain the merit pool process, how that actually now works.
Yeah, we've got a comp ratio system now, and we're going to talk a little bit about that when we approve our 4 union contracts later on the agenda. But basically, we're set up now. I think we've got customized appraisals in most of our departments now that are specific to that department, not just one size fits all, because how you evaluate a police officer is different than how you evaluate a public works employee. And so once that happens, then we've got this merit matrix where basically, I think in our case, you actually, if you exceed, there's 3 categories: exceed, meets, and below. And so if you exceed, you could actually obtain a merit increase of maybe 4.5%, maybe 4.75%. Depends on where you're at on the scale. And that's the interesting piece here, that if you're early in your career with the city, in the lower quadrants, you're eligible to get a bigger merit increase than you are if you're a longer-term employee. At the end of the day, the dollars are about the same, but the idea there is, again, to be able to not only attract but to retain these employees and get them up the pay scale much quicker. And, you know, the whole appraisal process, as we all know, is so difficult. It's so difficult to evaluate employees fairly, and just, you know, it's probably the most dreaded thing that most supervisors have. And so we're working through that process. And so employees that exceed actually are in some departments, for example, the fire department actually has a separate committee that is reviewing you as a supervisor. John, you might have rated somebody exceed. You're going to have to go before this group and explain why this employee exceeds. So I think we're putting some checks and balances in there to make sure that it's fair and that it's appropriate for the situation. So this is very new, something we've worked on for several years, as
Right.
the council knows, but we're truly on a merit-based system now, as opposed to the old days of the step systems. And that was a long time coming, and I think overall it's going to be a good change for us.
Thank you.
Just a couple things on head count. The only difference there is we do have the human relations officer is the only new position that's been added to the budget. We actually added that position in mid-2019, as you guys are aware. So we added, so the budget reflects $60,000 for that position. It's a part-time position also for other expenses to help the Human Relations Commission do their work in the community. So, but again, just a couple from the expense side of things as to what's in this budget. Just a quick look at outside agency funding. You know, the city doesn't have a lot of those. Arts and Humanities Council is being funded at the same level as it was last year. And you'll recall recently we just entered into a new agreement with Hutchinson to basically provide the operational oversight of the work that committee does. Cultural arts funding there, again, $47,250, same amount as last year. And that's where we're granting money to various groups in the community that are providing cultural activities. Example would be the Emancipation Day celebration, municipal band, and several others. And just another side note there, the Arts and Humanities Council actually is the group that hears these requests for grants and then makes a recommendation to the council on how that money is distributed throughout the year. So. Neighborhood development, we'll continue our partnership there with Hutch Rec, Chamber, and the Hutch Community Foundation. That's actually funded out of the planning department. The Entrepreneur Task Force, that was a new request this year. Council, remember, had a presentation on that. That $30,000 is in this budget for our commitment for year one of that effort. And then the Chamber asked for an additional $10,000 that the City Council agreed to proceed with. The one in red is the Welcome Channel. The big cut this year was $6,500. And that actually, you recall last year we cut that in half. And I think the county decided not to fund that as well this year. And so I think it was time just to kind of revisit that whole effort. And so we've cut that out of the budget. Quick note on the growth fund. The growth fund has a long history, and that comes back in the mid '80s when the community passed a half-cent sales tax, and part of that whole deal was a minimum of $700,000 was to be placed in a growth fund for economic development and capital improvements. And so, again, this year, the top side of the equation, economic development, $200,000 to the Chamber, and that's really the city's contribution to economic development in this community. Some cities have economic development embedded within the city. Some have it like we do, contracted with the Chamber or with the Development Corporation. And so that's our commitment to the economic development effort. And then the EOF City Reserve there, $150,000. That is really, I think, this is our third year of transferring $150,000 from that to a true economic opportunity fund that we now have, and that is for the city's benefit to be able to provide job incentives as we look at new industry coming into town or new projects. And so we're into our third year of that, and it'll take some time to get some real money in there, but I think that was a good move by the council a few years ago.
John, that extra $10,000 that we're allocating to the Chamber, will that come out of the growth fund or?
No, that's out of the general fund.
Okay.
Yeah. So the bottom part, the capital improvement has changed a little bit. Traditionally, it's been $250,000 for streets and $100,000 went to pay off the Salt City Splash 20-year bond commitment. And believe it or not, bond issues do come to an end.
Praise Jesus.
Yeah. This one did. And so this year was our last payment there. And so we proposed to take that $100,000 and put it into our street program. So this year we'll have the $350,000 out of the growth fund going strictly to the street department now, or street program. Now the bad news on that is we didn't really gain from that because we cut that amount out of the special street fund, which is a property tax supported fund, as part of our budget cutting effort. So it's not all good news there, I guess. Just a quick look at our street program. I think that's always something important in people's mind. You know, we've always said we spend roughly $3 million a year in our street program. In 2020, we're looking at $2.7 million. And you can see here kind of where that money goes. In our arterial collector, about $1.6 million. Our residential program, about $1 million. And then a small amount to ADA ramps, and then our bridge maintenance reserves. And so Again, we're looking to spend 2.7 next year on our maintenance program. And to be clear, this does not include our major projects. Later on your agenda today, you'll have a bid for our Main Street work. That's all bonded work, and so that is paid for out of our bond and interest. This is just really what we call our street maintenance program. And where the funding comes from this, just a refresher there, $1 million or roughly a third of this comes out of the quarter-cent sales tax. That's the quarter-cent that funds this, plus the Cosmosphere and the Salt Museum. The balance of that comes from our special street, which again is property tax supported. The growth fund, the $350 that I mentioned earlier, and then our federal fund exchange. Our federal fund's about $420,000, and then we typically have some reserves from previous years that go into making up the amount of money that we need to fund that program. And then just quickly, our capital improvement program. The 2020 total spending on capital improvement is budgeted at $14.8 million, compared to the previous year where we were in excess of right at $24 million. So just a quick look at some of the projects in this year's CIP. And the council knows as we go through the budget process, there are a lot of cuts that get us to where we are today, and a lot of that come out of the capital improvement program. But some of the projects that stayed in, first in Washington, parking lot project. Airport, we've got several projects there, the restrooms. We've got a seal coat on one of the runways, and then we're replacing one of the fuel tanks out there. Zoo electrical upgrades, the golf course master plan, continuing our efforts down there to improve the golf course. I think we've got scheduled 2 or 3 hole improvements for next year on this. And then there's a small amount, $82,000 for a cost share for a logistics building out at the Fire Training Center, and that's a project the chiefs worked on with HCC, a cooperative effort there. Parks and facilities, $285,000 of improvements. Some of that would be the Cary Park Road and parking lot improvements, and then playground at the new park, Southwest Bricktown Park. So, and then just overall water projects, we've got about $723,000 in various projects there. Sewer, 4.7, we've got a big number there. And you'll recall, we talked to you last spring, Brian did, about some of the feasibility of what needs to happen out there. We looked at the overall improvements and upgrades needed, and so we've got some big projects coming up, a secondary treatment, a pump station. We've got the UV building that's going to be upgraded, and so again, those are just some long-term maintenance needs that we need to do at our wastewater treatment plant. So,
John, before you leave that
Yep.
slide, the 3 bottom items, water, sewer, storm, those come from a different fund than the ones above them, correct?
Correct, yeah. Those are all, that's a good point, all out of our utility funds, aren't property tax related, and we'll talk a little bit about how we fund some of those, but you're correct, yes. And then just the last thing on utilities, just want to kind of remind the council a little bit. In 2015-16, we did conduct a formal water and sewer rate study. And that report we reviewed with the council in the, I guess it was May of 16, as part of our 2017 budget process. And that report did determine that we needed to increase our water rates and sewer rates, really to protect our fund balances and to provide the necessary money to invest in that infrastructure, which is certainly important to this community. And so the council, through a lot of discussions at that time, chose not to raise utility rates in 17, and we would revisit that in 2018. And so in 18, we basically proposed a 5-year program where we would raise sewer rates each year for the next 5 years from 6 to 7%, and then water rates at 5.5%. And so the 2018 or 2020 budget, we have 6% in for sewer rates increases, and then 5.5% on the water rates. And we spent a lot of time talking about that over the past several years and how important it is for us to be able to continue to invest in that infrastructure, because we've got a lot of old water lines and sewer lines in this community. So with that, I am going to close my summary comments, and certainly there are a lot of other things that that we've talked about during this budget process during the last month, all the study sessions the council had. But today was really just to provide just a glimpse of what the 2020 budget looks like. And I'm now going to turn it back over to the mayor to conduct the balance of this hearing, and we'll stand ready for any questions that you or anybody might have. Thank you.
Thank you, John, for the overview. As the council knows, it was a long process, several meetings, a lot of cuts to get where we're at, from the initial wish list, if you will, to what we're looking at before us today. I guess I would ask, does anybody on the council have any additional questions for John with regards to his presentation?
I just had one. I know that John and Mayor Inskeep, you had both met with the county to discuss how our appraisals came in. And I was wondering if they offered any clarity as to why our valuation dropped.
They did. Well, clarity, I'm not sure. I learned a lot with regards to how they evaluate property and different types of property. What came up was specifically what was referred to as Restaurant Row over there on 17th, and their method for evaluating and putting a assessment on that property. It has a lot to do with the lease structure because those businesses are not, the businesses that occupy those buildings don't own those buildings.
Mm-hmm.
And so as you get further into the lease, the county recognizes that the value of those buildings is valuable to the tenant, but not necessarily to anybody else, because a Buffalo Wild Wings is a Buffalo Wild Wings. I could go and open an insurance shop or whatever, but it may not lend itself to it. Right. So it has a kind of a fixed value. So I always thought everything was highest and best use, or not everything, but a lot of things were. John,
I couldn't have said it better.
Okay,
you did well. And there's a lot of moving parts to the whole appraisal process, and there's 3 methods that they use, and but the lease. This is the first time I really was aware of how they look at a property that's at the end of its lease. Now, the question is, it's going to be leased back again for another 5 years, but typically, that I didn't realize that actually occurred during the appraisal process. So,
well, looking forward, are there other developments that all popped up in a similar fashion at a similar time that are going to hit our valuation in a few years?
That was, and he kind of pointed that out, that was just a little bit of a unique situation, because all of those seem to come
at the
same time. And I can't think of anything right now that would equate to that.
And they're also very, very specific. They're restaurants. So you think the Rib Crib, you think of Buffalo Wild Wings, Olive Garden, versus some of our newer developments, maybe on 30th Street, that are retail spaces, but that could be office, that could be retail, that could be other things. So it wouldn't necessarily present itself on those developments like it did in these developments. Like John referred to, they anticipate that when those leases get signed, depending on the duration of those leases, then it should prop itself back up.
I was going to ask that. So a re-signing of the leases should result in an increase in the valuation?
Increase from its current state, not necessarily.
Yeah.
Because as the building also ages, there's other complications. Yeah.
So is it peculiar to eating establishments only, or are there other businesses that?
The timing of them, huh?
The timing is one thing, but I think typically restaurant development, that happens a lot, where you've got a real estate developer that buys property, develops it, and then enters into leases. That's fairly common in the restaurant world. Not so much in industry and smaller business type situations, but I think it's pretty common on the restaurant.
I think of also on 17th Street, but Sirloin Stockade, it was Kansas Buffet for a minute or whatever it was. In their infinite wisdom, those individuals tore that building down to put up a car wash because they didn't find the value in that existing structure, which was a restaurant. It was set up to be a restaurant. It was designed to be a restaurant, and so when it no longer was, they had to. The county was faced with forced to find a way to properly assess the value of the building.
So it's probably not just restaurants. I would say any retail that's fairly common, and I would put restaurants in that category.
Did they get into any discussion about the trend over the last 4 or 5 years in terms of the reduction in personal property tax valuations?
We didn't get into
not really,
that. I did a little research on it on my own and saw what everybody else saw was that it's gone down by 4.994 million
Yeah.
since 2015.
Since 2015, right?
Yeah. But I think that's maybe a result of some state
Some
legislation.
state legislation.
Yeah. Well, I mean, property, machinery and equipment is exempt
Is
now,
exempt,
and so,
yeah.
that doesn't do us any good from a tax perspective. And,
Okay.
And a lot of that equipment depreciates fairly quickly, and so the value
down to 20%, right.
But you bring up a valid point with a lot has been made of the drop in real property, but you can't discount the drop in personal property
Right.
on the income side of the balance sheet as well. So
And if that trend is still,
I think that trend's
Gonna
going to
be
continue
continue,
that direction.
yeah.
That's a
Really?
personal opinion, but that appears to be what it is. Any other questions for John? As it is a public hearing, we would invite anybody who has any questions about the presentation, about the budget itself, if you'll come to the podium and announce yourself and give your address, and please address the council with questions, comments, or concerns.
Sarah Bagwell, West 22nd.
Perfect.
I had some questions
Uh-huh.
on how are you guys feeling about the continuing with the 0.31 mill levy increase?
I'll jump in. I've,
.28.
0.28.
Oh, is it
well, it's
0.28 now?
0.29 is what it is now, yeah.
Okay.
Through our budget study sessions that we had, I think that came up in the third session as we were moving, had been talking about seeking to not raise the mill levy, but through the discussions, the idea of maintaining the revenue at what's now this year's level into next year would require 0.31. As it turns out, it's more like 0.28. Myself, I don't favor raising the mill levy, and we'll vote on the budget later in this meeting, but to answer your question, that's where I stand.
And I was in favor of it. Well, I should say that in the beginning, we all took a stance of nobody wanted to see a mill levy increase at all. But as we started delving into it and started making the cuts and so on and so forth, again, the drop in real property, the drop in personal property, that's on the income side, the increase in health insurance expenses and things like that, it seemed that we had to be prudent with the amount of money that we're going to see on the income side. So that's where I fell with the 0.288.
Okay, so I'm going to start off with just a little thing I wanted to share. So before the public meeting, there was a compromise, which is now at the 0.28. But the public or I only had access to the 2020 budget that included the 1 mil prior to the public meeting, which kind of hurts the ability, because you guys didn't publish the new ones currently on there, hurts the ability for you to be able to do research prior to the public hearing. And since this is a public hearing for input, you would think the public would be available to all the changes as they progress. So I was only able to study the original proposed 2020 budget prior to the meeting.
Which just to be clear, that's the proposed budget was 1 mil increase, and so there wasn't, there's not a lot of difference in what was, that you've looked at and what's today, and what we've talked about has been reported on, I think, in the news, but just to be clear.
I know that, yeah, well, that's
And
just
for
news
future
articles.
reference, the meetings are also public.
Yes, I watched those meetings.
Perfect, okay. Well, and I'm not sure if those were televised.
Yeah, those weren't televised.
Excuse
It's
me.
on
Studies.
YouTube.
The study
The
sessions.
study
Study
sessions.
sessions.
Oh,
excuse
yeah.
me. Yeah. Those are public as well. I know that does
Okay.
little for you today, but those.
Yeah, I think it's a valid point from a transparency standpoint that, and maybe, I don't know how that would work in the process, because with every budget session, we have several budget sessions in between meetings, it changes. But maybe moving forward, we could, I don't know if we would be able to have a redlined version of the budget, because that would be a pretty substantial amount of staff time and maybe not the best use of our resources. But maybe just online, a listing of the additional cuts, the cuts that you provide to us. That might be something that we would consider putting on the website in future years.
Right. Or like she had suggested, maybe we should consider having those meetings out here. Then you could view them on YouTube during your time or whatever. Again, doesn't help us today per se,
Yeah.
but the meetings were announced like they always are, and it was public forum.
Yes.
But anyways, please.
Okay.
Continue.
So I wanted just to share some personal feelings. I just wanted to thank you for putting the time and effort to avoid the complete mill increase. So I do want to recognize that. But I do not think we need to increase it at all. I have personally seen my property taxes go from $900 a year to $1,500 a year, which ultimately increases my mortgage payment. Even though I have a fixed rate on a principal loan, my mortgage payment has drastically increased over the years, causing the loan to increase because of the escrow payments. Although I'm fortunate enough to still be able to afford my mortgage, others are not so lucky. Some would have to default on their loan, causing bad credit. Others, like elderly woman I spoke to, has to use a credit card now to pay her property taxes because she no longer can afford them and tries to make payments on her credit card, which cuts into her food bill each month. She doesn't know what will happen if she maxes out her credit card because of the property taxes. You can try to reason why by saying, well, it's only $2. But how many times can you say that until it equals $20 or $30? See, year after year, small amounts can compound, leaving families with stagnant income and fixed income with hard choices to make. Do they refinance for another 30 years to lower their bills so that they may never see an end? Do they sell or do they move? That's just the impact on citizens. What about job opportunity? How many stores, factories, and employers will leave, costing jobs and revenue sources if we continue the trend of increasing taxes and fees? Increasing taxes to offset shrinking revenue sources only promotes the trend of shrinking revenue sources. It's a small-term Band-Aid that has a negative impact on citizens and the economy. You speak of the importance of your 4 pillars, but mainly we need to consider proper management and considering the small effects on the economy. You can't enjoy a mural or art in the city if you have to avoid potholes on your way to see them. This only emphasizes poor priorities. I'm not saying that I'm against art either. I'm just saying there's a time and place for when this is implemented, and that's when you have a strong economy and funds available. Many people have been there where you have to cut cable to make sure you have funds to take care of your kids and your family. It does not mean that you're against watching your favorite TV shows. It just means that you're against neglect and trying to stay responsible. One thing we should focus on to promote growth investments is our children. The Boys and Girls Club is a good example of good investment that helps many lives and children invest in our people, which I know you guys do invest in the Boys and Girls Club. So that is a very good decision. I do agree with that one. But we need to invest in our people because we need to increase our job force. That should be the #1 focus in enriching our community and economy. We need to invest in our people. We need to do this by investing in rehabilitation, promoting recovery, and getting people off drugs and to work, fostering trade apprenticeships and employment training. We don't really need to focus on art at this time, but rather infrastructure and building our workforce. So we can't have jobs come in if we don't have a workforce available for them to employ. Arts and Humanities Council and cultural activities. I like to sometimes think of, we can say a lot of things, but how are you going to fix it? So I have a few ideas. I'm not saying you should take them in the recommendation, but at least I'm setting forth that trying to come up with solutions. The Arts and Humanities Council and cultural activity can be combined into a community enrichment fund. I believe that sometimes you need to rework, rethink, and rebrand and consolidate. Foster new ideas so the dollars can start working for you. The new enrichment community budget could be $70,000, which is less than the combined total of the council and the because it's like a little under 87,000 for those two. The 70,000 for activities and administration and council could be compromised of a community board of volunteers, which would report to the city. This could include Hutch Fest, Cinco de Mayo, Emancipation Day, and I think a new one should be a City Recovery Day. An event at the fairgrounds to help raise donations and funding for groups like Oxford House and New Beginnings. There could be raffles, car washes, food trucks, and a cornhole tournament. By taking out the budget for the Arts and Humanities Council and giving that directly to an enrichment city fund that can be related to fundraising events, the fund could also get donations, which hopefully will eventually be ran off those donations and completely taken out of expenditures. That could potentially, after so many years, reduce the currently a little under 87,000. I know that's a small footprint, but you're also getting your dollars to work for the community. And I really think we need to focus on reevaluating how those two councils work and making sure that we get the best out of it. And if we could eventually create an atmosphere where it funds itself. Reducing administration costs. Consolidating departments to reduce overall directors and give lower level staff performance raises if target goals are met, and have that within the budget. For example, the general fund, this is just the general fund personnel, which has currently 308.9 overall, could be reduced down to 302 with a 6.9 personal reduction of so with the consolidated departments, you could yield 3 of the 6.9 be directors of those departments, and the reduction would not include law, fire, or police. So it would not include those departments, and we could maybe fund more in that area. These two examples give a reduced cost of the 200,000, which is a little bit over. Well, if you consider people that don't pay their property taxes, it's equivalent to what would need to be reduced out of the budget to not have the mill increase. Over the 5 years, it could possibly have a $1 million impact over the 5 years because it's permanent. And if the community enrichment fund does well, you could also subtract that 70,000 off of it. I've looked at all of the directors and departments within the city, and I have identified 3 that could be consolidated. I'm going to wrap this up. The 0.31, which now is 0.28, even necessary. The city manager stated that expenditures are often conservative and overstated. The previous budget had a deficit, yet by the year end resulted in a surplus of $937,000. Wouldn't it be better to decrease the budget than unnecessarily tax the citizens? Thank you.
Could I ask you before you leave, if you'd be willing, what are the positions that you identified?
The Parks and Facility Director with the Zoo Director, it's all under one thing, but we could possibly consolidate that. Public Works and Engineering, Building Inspection, and Director of Planning departments. And if we need to move around offices to consolidate those, a lot of times if you eliminate upper, like more costly positions, some of those management don't even have that many people under them. And management is usually to facilitate, and if it's properly delegated to lower level staff, you can get performance raises or even include more clerks, which are ultimately the people on the ground doing most of the work. So thank you.
Thank you again. Anybody else who wants to speak to the budget, please?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Carrie Mayhew of 10 Whitmore Road. I come with some praise and encouragement this morning. Through my role with Hutchinson Community Foundation over the last couple of years, I've been analyzing all of the surveys and assessments that have been done on our community, either from outside consultants or from our citizens, including the comprehensive plan, the Chamber Business Conditions Survey, Young Professionals of Reno County Impact Surveys, the Hutch Chamber Live Work Study, Community Health Improvement Plan, County Health Rankings, our Development Opportunity Profile, many different surveys. And my interest in this was finding the themes that come up in all of those, what the people say they want and what the assessments say we need, and where do they align. And so trying to get away from this feeling of, we don't know what we need to invest in, but we do. Like we have it right in front of us, and so let's put it all together. So the two top things that come up over and over again. Number one were jobs and business development, and under that, offering a variety of high-paying jobs, a broad choice of places to work, and provide an environment that is friendly to and encourages entrepreneurs, and incentives to small businesses, especially to locate and redevelop downtown. So I want to thank you for your support of economic development through the Chamber, and also of the Entrepreneurship Task Force request to help build the entrepreneurial ecosystem. We know that has been kind of a gap in our economic development plan for many years. We have not put as much resources or attention toward building the system of support around small businesses and encouraging entrepreneurs. So this entrepreneurship action plan that you all have supported initially, we hope will do that work and start to really build the network and infrastructure around small businesses. Right behind jobs is quality of life and aesthetics. And what we hear over and over again in these surveys and assessments is a call to appreciate, care for, and build on the amenities that we already have, with an emphasis on historic preservation and downtown revitalization. We hear calls to increase community pride, beautification, pedestrian-friendly built environment, rehabilitation of empty buildings and houses, infill, and incremental development, as well as to offer more and maintain lifestyle amenities like parks and trails. And I want to remind you of a couple of different consultant speakers that we've brought into the community in the last couple of years who have helped provide kind of their lens to this work. And one is education around placemaking and place science. So we know through place science and the Knight Foundation Soul of the Community study that people who have a strong sense of their place narrative and history and their sense of place in the community, and if the community has a strong social offerings, aesthetics, and is a welcoming place where they have a strong sense of belonging, it drives place attachment and local economic growth. So the things that make people feel like this is a loved place are the things like art, taking care of our buildings, our parks, our trails, our public spaces, the things that make people feel confidence in their place. The other thing is the Strong Towns approach. So we learned through that incremental growth and building on our current assets is a productive growth strategy, and it leads to more financial resilience for our community. So with that, I want to thank you for your support of the Parks and Rec Master Plan implementation, the Bike and Pedestrian Master Plan, the Comprehensive Plan, the Arts and Humanities Council, the Culture Activities Fund, Neighborhood Development, and those pieces that you are investing in that contribute to the sense of place in our community and will drive place attachment and investment. So, thank you for your work on this.
Thank you, Gary. Yeah.
Thank you.
And you
Thank
bring
you.
up a valid point. All those various comprehensive plan, all the other studies, we're all community input based studies, so we have to listen to what they're telling us. Thank you again. Beat me to it, sir.
Hi, Jackson Swear, 103 West 22nd. I just wanted to take a moment to thank especially the staff as well as the City Council for all of the work that I know went into this. I was fortunate and able to attend many of the study sessions. I know the efforts that went into cut from what the original department requests were. I don't think John mentioned in his opening, but I think it's relevant that I believe there was a $2.7 million in cuts before the City Council even saw it. So I just think that that's important for the public to be aware of as we sit in this public hearing, that a lot went into getting to where we are today. I want to also applaud you all, sort of echoing Carrie's comments, in your funding for economic development priorities like the Entrepreneurship Task Force, and also your funding for things that contribute to a thriving quality of life in our community. I don't think it could be stated strongly enough that if we have a concern about creating high quality jobs and having people have the wages that we need to support this community, which contributes to the tax base that we know we want to and need to increase, then we have to invest in the quality of life of our community so that people will want to live here. No one wants to drive down streets with no potholes to nowhere either. So we have to find the appropriate balance between these considerations, and I think a lot of effort has gone into doing that, so I thank you for that. And I guess I'm going to end it there. Carrie's got all of the data and more than I do to support why it is that we need to invest in those quality of life priorities. I thank you for that.
Thank you, Jackson.
Anybody else who'd like to approach and add any commentary or have any questions? Okay, council, anything that was brought up that leads you to want to amend or deviate or have further discussion on any points within the budget, the proposed budget, excuse me?
Well, I think what we've heard this morning, I think, is a continuation of some of the in-depth conversations as a city council and with city staff. This continual discussion and trying to measure core services versus funding outside agency activities. And I think it's very apparent that I have seen, since I've been on the council, an increased support for quality of life. That typically was not a center of discussion up until the last few years. And so I have begun to see, a whole host, as Carrie has outlined, of new initiatives that kind of repurpose ourselves in terms of it was all about jobs, and I can appreciate that, and it's certainly that has to be I think the backdrop of everything. But this quality of life, I think we'll continue to have that discussion among ourselves. We had thrown out several trial balloons the last couple of years on defunding certain entities. And that certainly did not meet with a great deal of support, and I was very reluctant to even suggest those kinds of things, but just to get it on the table for discussion purposes. So I think we're open. I'm open. Core services, I think, is so essential, and I would hope we would not compromise in any way in terms of continually declining any of our core services. I think that's public safety is paramount. Infrastructure is essential to what the general public expects.
I think you hit the nail on the head, and I think we were able to accomplish some of that with this proposed budget, with the merit-based increase in for the employees. We are continually battling with staffing levels in certain areas. But I know we lose a certain amount of public works folks and others to the private sector because they pay a different wage or whatever. That is directly related to how many potholes we can fix, how quickly we can respond to a water main break and things like that, how often the ditches are mowed, if you will, and things like that. And so by paying attention to our staff, and I think we were able to do that, find a way to get a raise. With regards to the jobs and economic development, additional $10,000 to the chamber for their efforts to solicit new business, $30,000 to the entrepreneur task force to fill a void where that is, and still be able to do that and fund the EOF without having to borrow from it to do so. So I wasn't ecstatic about the slight mill increase, but to be able to accomplish those goals, I think hits a lot of boxes for me in the core services and the EVO department as well.
sounds like we're having the discussion that might equally fit in the last agenda item, so
Yes.
this is a good time to do it, and
Right.
well, I want to follow up a couple of the comments made. I certainly wanted to comment, John, to you and your staff. I do know there's a lot of work that was done. Jackson made comment to it, and certainly we saw that in terms of the original proposal you brought to us that reflected $2 million plus in cuts, and then of course the additional work and effort that was done that we as council asked you to do. And I want to, and both Carrie and Jackson talked about quality of life, and I certainly, and kind of following up John's, I think quality of life is equally important to the core services. The difference is that quality of life expenditures are minuscule in comparison to multi-million-dollar streets and multi-million-dollar salaries for our public safety in terms of police, fire, dispatch, et cetera. But in my mind, they're equally important. It's a difference, of course, of the dollars that it takes to support those equally important services. I responded to Sarah's initial question in regards to the what's now a 0.28 increase. I didn't. We didn't take formal votes, but I didn't concur in our budget session to increase the mill levy. I felt that we could, and there were still a couple of suggestions either that I made and or the manager had made that could have been used to cover the budget without increasing the mill levy, and I'm still at that point. I know that we've got a property tax lid issue that impacts kind of in a cumulative fashion from year to year, but I just haven't been convinced, as I've heard and I've read and I've looked, that we needed to increase, even though it's a small increase, still an increase. And so I felt we could have met our budget and found the reduction of approximately $88,000, which is what the 0.28 mil increase reflects, and was at that point a few weeks ago, and remain at that point today.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just have a few comments. A lot of you have touched on what I wanted to say, so I don't want to belabor it. But I did want to thank everybody for standing up and giving your comments. So often we have these public hearings and nobody gives input. It can be very intimidating. It takes a lot of guts, especially to say things that might not be in agreement with what we're saying up here. So I appreciate you all. Again, to the staff, this can be a brutal and sometimes demoralizing process. So thank you for sticking in there with us, and please note that these cuts don't mean we don't appreciate what you proposed. You are the backbone of this community, and it brings me great pride that we're able to include in this budget a 3.5% pool for increases. We haven't been able to do that for a lot of years, and I think it was definitely past time. I think it ultimately comes down to what type of community do you want to live in? And a community is more than police, fire, and streets. I know when I go to visit communities and I marvel at the built environment. You know, I was just in Boulder, Colorado, and they have open areas where people can meander down streets and see performers. And there are just so many things that make up an enriching life that fall outside of what keeps us alive and well. So I, again, am proud that we continue to invest in the things that members from the community through survey after survey after survey have told us they want us to invest in. It was important to me to stay within the same expenses of last year. I was not in favor of the 1 mil increase. Of course, none of us were really in favor of any increase. After cut after cut after cut, we found a compromise where we could stay within the means of what we spent last year. That was important to me, so I am willing to vote for this slight increase. And I did want to address a comment by Ms. Bagwell on the recovery community and what the city's doing with that, because it's really kind of something we're doing under the radar. We did start a community drug task force in 2015. A lot of people haven't heard much about that, but it's been taken over by the sheriff, and it's now countywide. It includes members of the business community, the head of the chamber. It includes people on the criminal justice side. It includes people from Oxford House, and we're really working hard to come up with solutions, especially as you mentioned on the treatment side, the detox and treatment facility. We do meet monthly. I would love to get your email if you're willing to be a part of that conversation. We've only made small progresses, but every little bit helps, and I think as we continue to have conversations around that very vital issue in our community, we'll get more and more people on board, and more and more people excited about moving forward to solutions. So I did want you to know that there are people in this community, a lot of people in this community working on that. It's just probably not as touted as it could be. So that's all I had. Yeah, sure.
I just wanted to say.
If you don't mind, so people could hear you.
Okay. So I really like the Oxford House, and because it is a self-sustaining, it brings people up.
It's a great model.
And the new beginnings, because they employ people from those places and then gives them an opportunity to learn skills, and then they network those out to other companies in the community. So it's a very important role in getting people to have skills to be able to be in the job market. And so I know that some that use the city council sometimes can declare days and bring awareness to things, and I really think that we need to have a citywide recovery day and bringing that awareness to it, and then in a big event so that we can get good donation dollars directly into these programs that are improving our workforce.
Yeah, we'd certainly be willing to do a proclamation and
Yeah.
and do some, I guess, marketing around any kind of event like that. If Oxford House was behind that.
Because they do like little car washes here or there, but if
Yeah.
you could get all of them together in the one place to do where businesses can donate an item, and then you do a raffle, and then you could have food trucks that come in the area so that they could build a little bit more of their business. And then a lot of places around town will do, okay, if you buy from there, we'll donate this % to the school, right? So you could do something like that with the food trucks. You could have a tournament that people enter into, where some of those, and just really trying to get something that we could focus around to create a big event that brings funding to these that are privately, so taxpayers don't necessarily have to pay the expense, but when you get people involved that are willing to donate to that, then that's basically privately funded based off of your interests. That's why donations are a really important thing, and a city being involved in fostering the ability to people to donate to where they want to donate. That's why you could have Hutch Fest and Cinco de Mayo and have some of that incorporated in there, the fundraising, so that you can get the funds and balances in these to compound and then eventually phase out, and then you can get bigger and better engagement. So I really think events coupled with the recovery and having a proclamation, and because it's really important to the workforce, the New Beginnings and the Oxford House community is going to help us get people off drugs. And in order to do that, though, we currently do not have a detox facility in Hutchinson.
Yeah.
They have to go to Salina, and they also have to go to Wichita. When I was at the Wichita detox facility a few months ago, they said the majority of people that came in there was from Hutchinson. And the guy asked me, what's going on in Hutchinson, and why are the majority of the people here coming from Hutchinson? Well, because Hutchinson doesn't have one. And so then that impedes the ability for people who can't get to Wichita. I know that I believe Horizons or someone gives a gas voucher to get you there, but if you don't have a car or a means, then that gas voucher is really not going to do anything for you. And then you have to go through the detox before you can get into some of these other programs.
There are certainly a lot of gaps, but
Yeah.
I know Chief Hooper's also working with us on that, and yeah, would love to get you engaged in that conversation, because it seems like you've got a ton of ideas.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you again. Any more conversation, anything? If not, is there a motion to
I would move to close the public hearing.
Second.
move and second? Please call the roll.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dave Line?
Yes.
Soldner? Pyros de Carvalho?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, I need to make one comment. I know the hearing's closed, but
Oh.
it's still about the budget. That'd be
Please.
appropriate. And I meant to mention that, but, we're approving our levy today. We're also improving the Hutch Rec levy. Tony's here, but, as you know, we now approve their mill levy. Their budget's been approved. They've had their public hearing, and their levy is 3.683, same as it was last year, so no increase there.
So
But that's a part of our.
We have to approve their levy?
Well, I think you probably ought to. Yeah, so. I failed to mention that in my mill levy chart, but that's all I had. Thank you.
No change there. Yeah.
Okay, no
Tony's
change.
like, I'm sitting through this for nothing.
Okay. All right. Well, that brings us to the next item, if you would, please.
Item 7A, consider ordinance adopting the 2019 Uniform Public Offense Code.
Paul Brown, City Attorney. Couple of things to note for the council before we look at the specific ordinances. In your last issue of the Kansas Government Journal, you may see the summary from Amanda Stanley, the General Counsel for the League, about the changes, and that is kind of what has resulted in most of the changes is Amanda's approach to editing these two publications. Now, I'm not speaking ill of Amanda, because she knows where to find me. But she has taken a different approach, and there's much in there. And most of it has to do with adopting state statutes into these publications so that they can be filed before the municipal court. And probably 80% of it is exactly that. There aren't that many changes. They aren't new statutes. They were state statutes, and then they've been included in these publications. Secondly, I had Chief Hooper look at the two proposed publications to be adopted by the city to make certain that he didn't have any problem with those before we proceeded. So specifically with the Uniform Public Offense Code, which is the first ordinance that you're going to consider, there's a laundry list of not new offenses, but adopted offenses and included those. Those are verbatim, the state statute. They have not changed. Some things that are a little bit different, let me tell you the first one that's going to be different for the municipal court. We have not prosecuted possession of marijuana cases in municipal court. We've omitted that in past years. We are not doing that this year. I promised Chief Hooper when it came up for renewal that he had an idea to take care of those and address a lot of those in municipal court, Hutchinson Municipal Court, and we are proposing that to the council to do so. This helps the police department.
How are they prosecuted now? Where are they?
Through district court.
District court, okay.
And it will allow them to file it in the municipal court. And Chief Hooper has an idea about how to handle that so that it saves time for the police department. So that's why it's being proposed in this manner and not being omitted. There were some changes by the legislature about THC products, and if you have a physician's statement for a debilitating medical condition, that could be a defense, and they wouldn't be guilty of marijuana possession if it was for that purpose. That's one of the few statutory changes that actually show up in the Uniform Public Offense Code. And primarily after that, they're just all state statutes that have been adopted, and they are not changed. They are just being included, and that allows these offenses to be prosecuted in municipal court.
Versus district.
Versus district court. Have that option. Whether or not that will occur, that's kind of up to the police department. I mean, some of those, Amanda wanted to make those consistent with the criminal code, but some of those, possession of a gambling device, false membership claims, revealing tax information, probably not very likely to show up in municipal court, but certainly the police department would have that option if it were to occur.
Can you help me better understand the benefits of prosecuting that in municipal court versus district? Are there cost savings, time savings? Are the sentences different?
Some of that, particularly on possession of marijuana, the chief's going to come up, I can see.
Okay, great.
He wants to talk to you about possession of marijuana in particular.
Jeff Hooper, Chief of Police. Yeah, Paul and I had extensive conversations about this. This is something that a change that I wanted to specifically make. And specifically, most of what we're talking about, some of those other statutes that Paul referenced, very unlikely that they would end up in municipal court. But we do have a significant number of misdemeanor marijuana that currently now we send through district court. It will be a significant savings in manpower and time. Right now, if we have to send a case to district court, it requires that we do a complete report, do an affidavit, and all that, which is a significant amount of staff time just for misdemeanor marijuana. The advantage of sending it to city court is if we encounter somebody, we don't necessarily have to take them to jail, we don't have to take them into custody, we can issue them a notice to appear or a summons to court, just like getting a traffic ticket to them for misdemeanor marijuana, send them to their court date, and that's for first or second time offenders of marijuana. So it's just a significant savings of manpower on our part. Paul and I talked extensively about the extra workload it would put on municipal court, and I've spoken to them also. And we think that that's easily going to be handled with our current staffing levels. So.
Okay, so we're not looking at any additional positions or?
No, we're not. No, we're not.
Okay, because district court is county?
Yes.
Yes.
And so we're not, okay, I want to make sure we're not sliding county costs to city, but I guess it doesn't really matter. It's all the same taxpayers.
Yeah, and in reality, the misdemeanor marijuana has been in effect for years and years and years, and it really belongs in municipal court, in my opinion, because it is just misdemeanor possession of marijuana. We're not talking about major drug dealers or distribution or anything like that. We're just talking about possession of misdemeanor marijuana. So.
Great.
How many cases of that do you have, a month or a year, or what's the?
You would ask that. I didn't bring my stats with me, but I would guess we probably have 2 or 3 a week.
Okay.
For that, it's probably an average.
Okay. 10 to 12 a month, then maybe.
Yeah.
Okay.
And under the current guise, it would require an arrest?
Not necessarily require an arrest. It could be an arrest. It could be a physical arrest. And lots of times for misdemeanors, when we find somebody with marijuana, we do arrest them, take them to, and then we still have to do the paperwork in conjunction of that. If we don't arrest them, then it requires a full affidavit for the county to issue a warrant. Then we can go arrest them, or at least a summons to court, so that we can issue that summons and they can show up at court. In this case, sending it through municipal court, we can just write a summons right there at the scene, give them a summons, send them on their way.
Great.
It really streamlines the process and puts it where I really think the prosecution of those misdemeanor cases should be.
Chief, do you see any particular increase in the backlog at municipal court level?
I think that question, I don't, but I think that's a better question directed towards Paul.
I don't know that we have a backlog, council member.
Yeah.
We
Not
don't
at
have a
municipal
backlog?
court, no.
Okay.
Yeah,
So I
in
guess the
reality,
question-
because these will kind of go to court, anything, just like a traffic ticket or when somebody ends up going to court for a traffic offense. And if you're talking about 3 a week or 12 a month, in comparison to the number of traffic offenses that come through our municipal court, I mean, that's really small potatoes. I don't really think it's going to have a significant impact.
Okay.
Well, and I've had my fair share of tickets. It's been a minute, but still. And I never went to court. I just paid the fine. So is that an option then, to pay the ticket, if you will, and not have to go to court?
For a speeding ticket or a traffic infraction, you can usually just pay the fine and mail it in. But when you have a traffic misdemeanor, or in this case, a criminal misdemeanor, those are usually must appear. So
That
you would
would
have
be
to
a
show
must-
up in court.
Okay, still would be, okay.
There's not a schedule of fines for possession of marijuana.
Okay, okay. So you appear, it is a process, but again, it doesn't involve the affidavit.
And there's also a possibility they could be diverted.
Right.
Oh, good. So there is diversion for marijuana
Yes.
possession.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you for the clarification.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate it. Were you done with your
Yeah,
presentation?
other questions
Yeah.
from the council?
I think that's all I had.
Yeah.
Well, I think there was a question out there, I think Jade asked, and I was interested in the answer. What are the differences between penalties, district court versus municipal court?
Not really any difference in the penalties. Their classification of misdemeanors, you can't hear felonies in municipal court,
Right.
but they're the same classifications they are at the state level.
So you
So-
still have the opportunity for diversion in district court?
Yes,
I didn't realize that. Okay.
yeah, there are diversions handled by the district attorney's office.
So it'd just be the location
Yes.
and what court is
What court
handling
it's assigned to.
the matter. Okay.
Very good. Any other questions or a motion?
I'll move to approve the ordinance regulating public offenses within the corporate limits of the city of Hutchinson, Kansas, incorporating by reference the Uniform Public Offense Code for Kansas City's edition of 2019, and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second?
Moved second, please call the roll.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dave Light?
Yes.
Pyrus de Carvalho?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes, next item.
Item 7C, whoa, hold on here.
You're good.
B.
B.
Where did I go? Sorry, my, consider ordinance adopting the standard traffic ordinance for Kansas cities.
Paul.
Again, on the standard traffic ordinances, there's not a great many statutory changes, and most of them are adoption, having it be consistent with the state provisions in the Uniform Traffic Act. There were some statutory changes. Some had to do with the with DUIs and the preliminary breath test, which had some constitutional issues, and the courts had struck down part of that, basically saying you couldn't prosecute someone for refusing a preliminary breath test because that they have a constitutional right to do so. So they eliminated that offense, and then they changed the statute at the state level to show that you may consent to such a test, and it can be used against you, but you can't prosecute them for not doing so. So those changes have been reflected in there. Some of the others were fairly minor changes from some of the state acts about you have to stop at a railroad grade crossing. Well, you also have to stop for other on-track equipment. I know that's exciting. So if it's a service truck of BNSF coming down the track, you have to stop for them also. And some of those changes were fairly minor. ATVs, UTVs can be used for agricultural purposes and be able to cross some roads. One thing that might come to the council in the future, the electric assisted scooters, you've heard some of those in other communities. It's in the standard traffic ordinance. It says that they are allowed. It says that they are subject to the regulations regarding bicycles. But the council also has the authority to decide whether or not those will be allowed in Hutchinson. So that may come to you at a future date.
To be determined then, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
But the council gets to weigh in on that issue. It's not being proposed at this point, and I know that certainly police and others will want to weigh on that issue because there are some safety concerns with the electric assisted scooters. But that is there, and it is in the standard traffic ordinance. There's some things about the transportation network lighting device, which is to try and identify Uber-type vehicles. If this is an Uber vehicle, you can put a light up in the dash to notify others that it's that type of vehicle. And then some minor things about, if you're stopped by the police, you actually have to hand them your driver's license.
Oh, yeah, I read that.
Before, some would say the statute said you had to display it, so they just kind of show it to them and not hand it over so that they can take it back to the patrol vehicle and run a record check. The statute was changed. You have to hand it over to the officer. So that's one of the changes. And then again, all the others that were added that were existing state statutes and adopted here to make it consistent. And one last thing just for fun. Would you like to hazard a guess as to what a lightweight roadable vehicle is?
Lightweight road.
A lightweight roadable vehicle.
Roadable.
It's an added definition.
Something like we had a fellow here last year driving around in what was kind of a bicycle, but I think it was a three-wheel thing and had a covering on it. That's my guess.
It is a vehicle allowed to be driven on roadways and required to be flown under direction of the Federal Aviation Administration.
No?
A flying
Combination car and
a
plane.
drivable airplane or a flying car?
Drivable
huh?
airplane.
Combination car and plane.
All right.
You heard it. We've made it, folks. We have flying cars.
That's right.
They've been
George,
promising me
definitely.
my jetpack for how many years now, and we're getting close.
The Jetsons. Yeah.
Right.
And that's so
exactly.
you know
Yeah,
I
Jets-
actually read all these things.
Yeah.
Flying car. That is.
That's all I have.
Thank
Well,
you.
Paul, you referenced the LKM publication, and I did start reading that, but quite frankly, my eyes started glazing over. And I do remember the driver's license one, but anyhow.
Very good. Any other questions of council or?
I would move to approve ordinance incorporating the 2019 standard traffic offense ordinance by reference and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
Moved and seconded, please call the roll.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dave Light?
Yes.
Pyrus Carvalho?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes, thank you. Next item.
Item 7C, consider ordinance amending Chapter 27 of the Hutchinson City Code.
Good morning.
All right.
Not as exciting as Paul's flying car here, but Ryan Vietluk, Director of Planning and Development here with the city. Before you this morning is a proposed zoning ordinance amendment dealing with public hearings and notice, specifically a handful of sections in the city ordinance, 27501, 502, 1106, and 1202. Which would be creating a new section 27325. It's actually kind of apropos that you see all of those because that's kind of the main point of this. One of the things I did when I came into this position is start looking at our zoning ordinance and trying to figure out how can we consolidate some things. And the first thing that I noticed is that we have public notice requirements scattered throughout our ordinance. Those four areas is really the main part of it. And so the first part of this ordinance would actually be to consolidate them all into one section of the ordinance. This is important in general. One of the things we hear a lot from the development community is that the ordinance is just, I have to do a lot of flipping back and forth. And so while this is a kind of a minor change, it's sort of the start of probably some other significant changes that will be coming forward to both the Planning Commission and to this body to try to kind of clean up our ordinance and make it a little bit more user-friendly for people. So the second part of the ordinance is actually, or of this proposed ordinance, is actually adding an additional requirement for our public notice process. So currently, we require a mailed notice and a newspaper notice. Kansas state law does allow for additional public notice procedures, and what we are proposing is to actually post a sign on the property. This is a common requirement throughout Kansas. You typically see it more in the KC metro area, and we already have it as a requirement for our administrative adjustment process. And so we've kind of trialed that and seen that's been very successful. It's just another way for people to be notified that there's something maybe going on in your neighborhood. Give the city a call if you have a question about it, because we all kind of know that people aren't really reading the newspaper notices, and people are only being notified within 350 feet for mail notice, and so we always get hearing from people, well, I didn't know that this was going on in my neighborhood, and well, why did my neighbor get notice and I didn't? And you have to have that explanation of, well, you're just outside of that 350 feet. And so this would be a way to really, just add another way of doing that. So the sign you see there on the right is the sign we use for our administrative adjustment. That square in the middle is some cardstock that we can actually type up and put the information in for it. We're going with a bright color, so it's just another way that someone can actually kind of see to get people's attention. So. It's really a pretty straightforward ordinance. The city attorney had reviewed it and had some proposed minor wording changes which have been incorporated into it. And with that, we have a recommendation to approve the zoning amendment to add a section 27325 to the ordinance, amend 27501, 502, 1106, and 1202 of the Hutchinson zoning ordinance or zoning regulations.
Well, I was really glad to see the posting addition because it does broaden, I think, very well the notice to people. And as you pointed out, even if one is an avid newspaper reader, I don't know too many who avidly read the public notices. But so that was very good, and then certainly support making less cumbersome our zoning regulations in any fashion. So both are very good moves.
Same 20-day advance of the public hearing?
Yes, that is correct. Yeah, that doesn't change. That's required under state law.
That is perfect. I agree. Same thing. And I've seen it in the KC Metro. I saw it in Colorado recently. I think this is almost better. you know, when you think, okay, we're getting bigger, we should post it online and do that. And I'm not suggesting we shouldn't, but this hits home to the people that live there. When I'm pulling in my driveway, I can see something's happening on this piece of property or whatever. So, because one of the first things we always ask is, was there any public comment? And without fail, usually very little. Is that because of notification? Well, maybe we'll find out. This is a step in the right direction. And the consolidating of the stuff. Kudos to you, fresh eyes, you know, looking at our stuff and seeing something like that. So that also is a good catch there.
Ryan, what sort of quantity of comments has your office been receiving relative to the administrative adjustments signage that we've been using? What's it been, about a year now?
It's been about a year. We haven't had a ton of them. Honestly, most of them, the process is working well for kind of the simple changes. It doesn't really generate much public comment, and I think we might have had one that actually got kicked to Planning Commission.
But are you getting phone calls saying, well, hey, I saw this sign, what's it about?
Yeah, we get phone calls quite often, and we
okay.
explain to them, and they're like, oh, okay, I don't need to worry about that,
Yeah.
and you know, thank you. So yeah, we're certainly getting phone calls, so people...
Fairly regularly then, when those
I
are
would
up?
say pretty regularly,
Okay.
yes.
Ryan, on the posting, is that 200 feet, 350, or 1,000?
It was kind of depends on where it's located in the city. I believe, and I don't have the
Yeah, I
number
was
from-
trying to read through that, and I understand
believe
in
it's
unincorporated
350,
areas
and
it's...
then there's the unincorporated that if you're right on the city boundary, you have to actually post or a mail notice to anyone within 1,000 feet. So
Okay.
That's once again kind of a corporate.
So it just mirrors whatever is done on the mail notifications?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions of staff? Motion?
I move to approve an ordinance amending section 27501, 27502, 271106, and 271202, as well as creating section 27325 of chapter 27 of the Code of the City of Hutchinson, Kansas, and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second?
Moved and seconded. Please call the roll.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dave White?
Yes.
Pyrus Carvalho?
Yes.
Inskeep.
Yes. Next item, please.
Item 8A, consider proposed memorandums of understanding with collective bargaining units.
Mayor, Council, the city's negotiating team has completed our contract negotiations with all 4 of our collective bargaining units. In your packet was a marked up MOU, as well as, I think it was the biggest packet maybe we've sent out in history, as well as a final document. But what I thought I might do is just kind of go through each of the unions, and then we can open it up for questions after that. So just to begin with the SEIU, which is our Service Employees Union, not a lot of changes there. I'll just point out some of the highlights as we go through. Appendix B, which is the 2020 pay range, again, based on the survey that we did in-house, we increased the, actually adjusted probably, I think it was 16 public works jobs up, the ranges based on that survey. The Appendix C is the merit and bonus plan that we put together. Really the big change there was the union agreeing to the comp ratio based merit increase matrix. And then also in all the unions, you'll see where we've increased the ratings somewhat, particularly on exceeds. I'll just point that out. Where in the overall, or the existing program, it was 2.4 to 3.0 to exceed. That probably doesn't mean a lot to you. We've increased that to 2.6 at the bottom. So that you'll see that in all the union agreements. And the duration of agreement for the SEIU is 2 years, and that would be with openers limited to wage and scale movements. The SEIU dispatch, Article 13, miscellaneous leaves, we provided some clarification on bereavement leave, which really just clarified the definition of a child. Now it reads a natural child adopted or other child the employee has obtained legal guardianship. So again, just some cleanup language there. Appendix A, base pay range, no change in the base pay there based on the survey again. And Appendix 3 again is the merit-based pay and bonus plan. The unions agreed to adopt the comp ratio-based merit increase system. And then duration agreement for the SEIU dispatch is again 2 years with reopeners on wages.
Question, John.
Yes.
I noticed on the, assuming I got to the right place here, on the SEIU dispatch, the exceeds is a 2.5 to 3 range rather than 2.6. Is that intentional?
Tom might have to help me with some of this, yeah.
It is
I think it was,
Yes,
but
yes.
yeah.
Very
Very
customized
good
into the-
catch. And,
Yeah.
and yes, it is intentional, and we set those points based on where this year's data and the year before's data has been falling out on the scale, and what percentage of people are falling up above or below that number. And
Okay.
that group has been particularly more on the low end, more towards 2 than some of the other groups.
So a customization, or a further customization
Yeah.
within the merit-based evaluation system.
That's
Okay.
exactly right.
Yeah. Good catch.
Along the lines of it, but just a curiosity, I know they have maybe a little trouble with retention, or is that stabilizing at all? Are we?
Too early to tell.
Okay.
I think there's some good changes happening there, but it's always a work in progress. So,
Okay.
yeah. But I think the system that we're adopting will also help a lot with that.
I assume as well.
Yeah.
Very good. Thank you. Sir.
Thank you, Tom.
Okay, the next group, the FOP, which is our Fraternal Order of Police, representing our police officers. Starting with Article 10, base pay and compensation. In the current agreement, we have the ability to provide an officer or an employee that would come to us, a police officer that already has the Kansas Certified Law Enforcement certification. And with less than 5 years of experience, we can start them at 5% above the base, in 6 years or more at 8%. And the new language basically gives the chief the authority to make that decision on an individual basis at up to 12% above that entry-level pay. And again, these are officers that would come to us that already have the Kansas certification. Now, Article 10, that deals with Section 4 on the FTO pay. That's our Field Training Officer Program. Basically, the new agreement provides for a more consistent rate of pay for officers that are signed to the FTO. Previously, they were paid for actual time worked. We're proposing now that it be a flat per hour versus the 5% that they were paid for. So the flat per hour is $1.25. And the key point there is that is a part of their base pay. So if they were promoted later, they would be promoted with that idea of their base pay. Article 10, special duty pay. Essentially, the new agreement, we're eliminating a special pay for the EVOC, which is the Emergency Vehicle Operations Certification. All right, yeah. And we're eliminating that, and we're adding special pay for our 2 K-9 officers. And so we had 5 EVOC officers that had the certification that were receiving special duty pay. That will go away, and the 2 new K-9 officers will get special duty pay. Article 24, the retirement award. Basically, we just clarifying some language there. Basically, the new language allows, this is where an officer would be eligible for receive their badge and weapon upon retirement. We've now basically clarified that to talk about career-ending illness or injury, and this again is solely the police chief's decision at that point. 2020 pay ranges, Appendix B. Again, no changes in the pay ranges there based on the market study. Appendix C is the merit-based pay bonus program. The FOP actually adopted this program last year, so they've already had this in play before. So in Appendix D, line of duty shooting, basically insert some language that the chief and his appointed designee make that determination. The old language had referred to captain and assistant captain or assistant chief. And the FOP contract is for a duration of 1 year and not the 2 years as previously discussed. So it would be able to be reopened, anything within that agreement.
John, I noticed that they were the only group that didn't go for the 2 years. Why was that?
That was just their
Just their
decision.
preference?
They're just weren't comfortable with that, and certainly understand that.
Okay.
So, yeah. The fire union, IAFF, very few changes there. A lot of this stuff was some work. The first one, the promotional ranking procedures, was really worked out between the chief and that negotiating team ahead of time, which made things go a lot smoother. Appendix B, the 220 pay ranges. We did increase those pay ranges for the, was it firefighter and captain? Just firefighter. The range is at 1.5% there based on the study. They again agreed to the merit-based pay and bonus plan, the comp ratio system with the cutoff points that we talked about previously. The fire agreement is a 2-year agreement with reopeners limited to wage and scale movement. And I just wanted to make a couple comments to kind of summarize, and then we'll open up for questions. And, I really think in the history of our community, I'm not sure history of the unions, that we've ever had 4 union contracts on the same agenda before we approve the budget. I would bet never, but there could be one out there. And I really think there's a lot to do with that. And I wanted to thank certainly the negotiating team for the city, along with me. Tom Sanders worked a lot of hours on this whole process. Our 2 chiefs, Chief Beer and Chief Hooper, were great to kind of have that communication outside of the negotiation process with the negotiating teams. Brian and Justin from the public works side. And then on the union side, we really, I think, looking at least for me, it was really a good process this year. It was really more like conversations that we had. We had great people at the table from the fire department. Captain Troy Mueller led the fire negotiating team. Sergeant Mike Collins led the police negotiating team. And then SEIU was represented by Esau Freeman, who represents those 2 unions. And again, their leadership at the table, I think, helped this process move along a lot smoother than what it seems we've had in the past. So with that, I'm just going to open it up for any questions that you guys, council, might have. And really happy and want to recommend that council approve the memorandums of understanding with our collective bargaining units as presented.
John, I want to second what you said about staff and about the union leadership. It is nice to come to this time of the year and be coming to an end and dealing with approval of these memorandums of understanding and contracts, rather than months from now, or one today and another one in 2 months, or whatever the case is. So again, as you said, good job to you, staff involved, and as well as the union leadership.
Very good. Any questions of staff?
I'm not jinxing this.
Yeah, right. There you go. Very good. Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, then make a motion.
Would you?
Yeah, I'll move to approve the proposed memorandum of understanding with the Service Employees International Union Local 513 AFL-CIO and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
Do you have something to say?
Well, I was just going to say, I know we've got some representatives. I don't know if anybody wanted to say anything. I just wanted to, if not, probably a good thing. We're going to get this approved. So, yeah. Thank you for being here, though.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for hanging in.
From the representative bargaining units, absolutely. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, John, for bringing that up as well. It's been moved and seconded. Please call the roll.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dave Line?
Yes.
Iris De Carvalho?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes.
I move to approve the proposed memorandum of understanding with the Service Employees International Union, SEIU, Local 513, Hutchinson, Reno County Emergency Communication Employees, and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Please call the roll.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dave Line?
Yes.
Iris De Carvalho?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes. Next item.
I would move to approve the proposed memorandum of understanding with the International Association of Firefighters, Local 179, and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Please call the roll.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dave Line?
Yes.
Iris De Carvalho?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes. Last motion. Who wants it?
Move to approve the proposed memorandum of understanding with the Fraternal Order of Police, Lodge Number 7, and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Please call the roll.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dave Line?
Yes.
Iris De Carvalho?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes. Next item, please.
Item 8B, consider Fenn Valley bleacher replacement bid results.
Good morning. Justin Combs, Director of Parks and Facilities. Just in case you have not been to Fun Valley recently, I do want to share just some images of what the existing bleachers look like. Steel construction frame with all wood planks and seats.
Looks like redwood in the picture.
Looks like I think it rained that spring.
I think you're right, yeah.
Yeah.
We did not stain those. And this image just shows some of the older planks and some new ones we've done over the last few years, just to keep them as safe as possible. Again, and I think I have one more image of the current condition. There's lots of issues with these. ADA compliance is one. Code compliance is another one. We have a major safety issue with these. It's the board I call your kick board, or the board if you're sitting down where your heel would be. There's a huge gap right there right now. So we've had things fall through. We have had a few children fall through. Luckily, nobody's been injured, but that's a major code issue that we needed to correct. And luckily, we haven't had any major issues with them. But just as a reminder, they are in pretty rough condition. They are original to the site.
Which makes them how old?
About 30 years old. Yep.
Oh, it's even more than that.
Before that, probably 40.
40?
40.
Yeah.
Well, they're not that old then.
Yeah. Agreed. Again, you can see that gap a little bit better. I was just referring to there in that image. So the new design, so we've been working on this for about a year now. The new design did break the bleachers down into 3 individual sections. And we'll kind of go through them one by one here in a little bit more detail. But section 1 is directly behind home plate. So that's the section that connects the ground level up to the upper deck from the restroom concession stand building.
And you'll still do that?
We will, yep. Section 2 then here, it really replaces the great big section that we now have down either side, left field and right field. And then this is new. A new idea here is what we're calling section 3, which is really a decked system, more for kind of groups to sit together in flexible seating or people to bring their own chairs. And I'll show you exactly what that looks like here in just a second. The other thing I want to point out is we're also with this project moving the dugouts closer to home plate. Currently the dugouts are actually right out here by and actually beyond first and third base. That was designed intentionally for adult softball because you want softball players a little bit further away from the umpires, away from the batters, those sorts of things. Now that we're primarily youth, the coaches and the players really expect to be a little bit closer to the action. And so this was a major complaint we had through HCC. They actually set up a temporary coaches box now, so their coaches can be a little bit closer. And so really this just fits what's more common, more modern in ballpark design. Also, with the placement of the existing dugouts would have really impeded our ability to design new bleachers. So they kind of have to work together.
So where will the dugouts be?
The dugouts are now, the dugouts are now right here. I'll show you that a little bit closer. So they're now much closer, kind of where you traditionally see them between home and either first or third. So here's a view of section 1 then. As you can see, it starts at ground level, comes all the way up to to that concrete deck that we have, and we provide some ADA seating up here. And then this is a top-down view, so you can see that ADA seating here. These sections are much wider than what we have now. Our sections now are about 7 feet wide with the center aisle. These are 15 feet wide, each section with a center aisle. Part of that was to capture the shade that we had at no cost. Also, it matches better with the design of this concrete deck up above.
Remind me, is there an elevator?
There is an elevator, yes. Yep. So section 2, then this is where things really get change a little bit. So here you're seeing kind of a cross section. So this is the new dugout that we've moved down closer to home plate. And then we have this ramp that comes up the back, and then we have there's 5 rows. You can't see there's a row here. There's 5 rows of seating up above the dugout. One of our goals with Fun Valley was to try to keep some of the grandeur, it's a word, I think I stole that word from Tony, of the complex, because we are so overbuilt now with seating, and we have such a height with our bleachers. And so by doing this, by elevating this second section up above the bleachers, we kind of mimic some of that. So we still have some height there that people aren't used to seeing, without completely overbuilding. We'll get to the numbers of seats here in a few minutes, but without completely overbuilding like we are now.
So you said there's 5 rows?
5 rows, 3 sections of rows. You can kind of see in this image, there's a section here with a walkway, section here with a walkway. Everything's ADA compliant, code compliant. It's got the chain link fence so you don't fall through, handrails, all that meets all
You
current code.
specifically said ramp too, not stairs.
This section does not have a ramp. This section only has stairs.
It is stairs, okay.
Yep. Yep. I mean, in part of ADA, you don't have to provide access to every single point, just
No, no.
just equal opportunity to view the game.
Very good.
So section 3, this is kind of an idea that I've had for a long time, is to develop this almost club style seating. So these are 2 decks. They're 8 feet wide. And then there's about I think that's an 8-inch difference, maybe it's a 6-inch difference. The idea with these is primarily for tournament games where people bring their own chairs. You don't want to sit on an aluminum bleacher if you're going to be there all day. So you bring your own chair. So now we're allowing people to have a nice view, an elevated view of the field, but now you can sit together as a team. You know, if you've got 15 parents, you can kind of claim a spot here, all sit in your comfy chairs and have a nice view of the field. So that's section 3.
You said 8-foot width. Did you mean depth perchance?
Depth, I'm sorry, depth, yeah, from
So how
front to back,
wide
and
is the-
then there's a step.
Okay. About 20-some, 25
Yeah.
or so?
Yep. Yeah, it was right at 25, yeah.
That's one of the alternates?
That is one of the alternates, yeah. We'll get to the bid package as well. We did a lot of cost estimating up front, and this was one we were a little bit worried about, could we afford it or not, so we offered that one as an alternate. You also see this one has shade here. Section 2 has some shade too that were also offered as alternates. We did that because we have so much shade already in section 1, and to provide shade for these sections were actually relatively expensive. Because this is cantilevered out over the section, or over the bleacher section, you have to have a really big footing to hold that thing in place. So it got pretty expensive to do the shades. And again, we were worried about that, so we offered that as an alternate, hoping we could afford it, but trying to stay within our budget. So seating comparison, so our existing, we have 980 seats per field. That's based on an 18-inch seat width. That's kind of industry standard. That's tight, but so in theory you could get just under 1,000 people per field at our seats, or at our stadium now. Proposed, we cut that basically in half, 475, which really is our goal was around 400. We on a big tournament championship game, we were more than confident that 400 seats is plenty of seating. And this does only include sections 1 and 2. Does not include that third section because it's really hard to put a number on that section. So the bid, we'll dive into the bid a little bit. We have 5 bid items. Item 1 is mobilization. Demolition was number 2. Bleacher section 1, all 4 fields. Bleacher section 2 for all 4 fields, and then the new dugout. So that was the base bid. So you get section 1, 2, and the dugouts. Our alternates then were to provide shade for section 2 for all 4 fields. Provide bleacher section 3 per field only. This was one we thought maybe we could do for 1 or 2 fields if we could afford it, as well as shade for section 3 we did per field. That would be an option to provide shade on that additional section. So bid results, we had two that responded, Ward Davis and A&A Builders, both out of Hutch. You can see their base bid numbers here, 935 for Ward, 675, 444 for A&A. I do want to point out the major difference there. I know those are significantly different numbers, and if you look at section 2 and section 1, we have they're bidding 2 different manufacturers. Both manufacturers were approved ahead of the bids being due, and we got the bids back. I saw that huge difference. I asked A&A, who was low, to provide me who their vendor was, provide me with some detail. I passed that on to the architect. Architect reviewed it. He was happy with it. It was one of the vendors he approved prior to the bids being due. So That's the big difference there. If you look at everything else, the mobilization and demolition, some of that stuff, it's all pretty simple or similar. It's just two different bleacher manufacturers. Let me jump into some of the alternates here. Alternate 1, so that is shade for all of Section 2, $270,000. Section 3 then came out to $65,600 per field, where you can see the total there. And then alternate 3 then was shade over that third section for another $58,000. So then their total bids are down here below. Budget for this project was $750,000. So it is my recommendation to proceed with A&A Builders. The base bid is $675.44, or $444, plus alternate to 1 field only, so that'd be field 3, for an additional $65,600, bringing the total contract amount to $741,044. I do want to point out why we chose field 3. Field 3 is home to HCC softball. It is also kind of the championship field for Hutch Rec tournaments, so that's kind of our premier field, I guess, if you had to say so. And we're providing one additional bleacher section for that field as well. Talked with Josh Gooch, athletic director to college. He was excited about that section 3 because now he could maybe have some premium seating or some club seating or something like that that he could offer his fan base. So.
But it will be unshaded.
It will be. They're actually designed, if Kansas winds will allow, that you could put a tent up on those.
The 1 field with the alternate, remind me, is that the bleacher section, but is that on both the first and third base line?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
1 field only, but both,
both
base
sides.
lines?
Yeah.
Okay. I've got a couple questions for Mr. Tony Finley, if you're prepared. I like it when you're unprepared. Then you go. No. With regards to the change in the amount of seating, I did the math real quick, and all 4 fields at 475, it's 1,900 seats available, not including the additional ones for field 3 that we have. Is that adequate for the programming that you guys are doing there?
For sure.
For sure.
Yeah, we're way overbuilt to begin with.
So,
So,
yeah. And anything you saw within the plan, minus the shade piece or whatever, which I'm sure we all would have enjoyed, but is it hitting the marks of the?
Yeah.
You hear what people complain about when you program these tournaments and things like that. Are these hitting some of those marks?
Oh, for sure. Justin's kept us in the loop the whole way. We've been part of the process, so a lot of what you see is the collaboration of us working with city to do that. We love the shade. We'll see how that works. We might be back later looking at some alternates there, but this is a much improved step forward for sure.
Okay. Anything else?
So put the whole package together of this plus the restrooms and so on, summarize all that for us.
So, as you mentioned, was it 40 years, the bleachers? I think, or so 30 to 40 years. Everything out there is that old, right?
Yeah.
Except the paint. We just got the paint done 3 years ago-ish. We put a new roof on the concession building, so that's going to help with, the leakage we had and just the presentation of that. So a lot of things happening soon. Not to jinx us, but this is year 5, and it looks like we've overcome the subsidy issue as far as operations. We're setting, with just a few tournaments left, at a break-even point on ours.
Fantastic.
So that is 18 tournaments to date that generated just under 400 teams. So if our fall tournaments work, about 21 tournaments, 22 tournaments with over 400 teams. So it looks like we turned that. And I think these bleachers are just going to help us in the restroom improvements with the next step. I wouldn't be me if I didn't remind you all that we have a parking lot issue.
Yep.
So I will
Right.
get that.
I haven't heard that before.
Yeah.
Hey, do you value shade or parking? Or I say your consumer?
Yeah, both. Yeah.
Both, obviously, yeah. But
no, we understand the limitations, and the shade just isn't
doable right now. But yeah, parking needs to be
Is paramount.
looked at.
Well, we're actually, by adding the, what do they refer to, the alternate two, those, oh no, those aren't shaded. We're keeping the shade we've got.
Yeah, the shade we got.
Matter of fact, we're, as I recall, Justin, we're increasing the seating capacity under those
shade.
canopies.
Under those
So we're
shaded areas,
basically
right.
increasing the
Right.
shaded
And
seating.
that's why we're very happy with this.
Yeah.
We'll see how it functions. We'll see the response we get from the users. We want to remind, there's a lot of Hutch residents that use that.
Sure.
We had 800 kids playing baseball, softball of Hutchinson out there this year. So a lot of local use as well as the
Yeah.
tournament operation.
Awesome.
Yeah,
And
excellent.
when is the bathroom? Where
are we on the
We're getting
bathroom?
close to that, aren't we?
Yeah, that bid is out right now.
It's out right now.
I think it's due in a couple weeks.
Okay. So we'll be seeing that before
I
too
think-
long.
Yeah, I think the first meeting in September, I think,
Okay.
is what I have scheduled for that.
All right.
These other alternates that aren't necessarily being recommended for this deal, are those things that you're going to include in your future CIP or?
The only one we could possibly do is if we really like that section 3 and do shade on section 3. It will be nearly impossible to come back and put shade on section 2 because of the footing.
It would have had to.
We would
done an
basically have to,
installation.
yeah, we would have to almost remove all of section 2
Mhm.
to pour that footing. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is all bonded.
This is our.
We're, Justin, you might talk about how
Talk
we're
about that.
financing this combination of two things.
Yeah, so back in, I believe it was June, I came
The
to
old
you
Orchard Park.
with
Right.
Orchard Park, which was a bonded project. So we moved $181,175 from that project to this. And then the balance, which is $559,000, then will come from the bed tax.
Oh, okay.
That's
Right.
that
Okay.
1%.
Great.
Yeah, that 1%.
And that will eat up about 100% of what we had set aside for the capital improvement side.
I was going.
Okay.
Okay. How much of the bed tax does that 540 some thousand consume that we've got in that?
Almost all of it.
Almost all of
Almost
that.
all. Maybe is that what you meant when you
Yes,
just
that's
said?
what
Oh,
I said,
okay.
yeah.
I'm sorry.
Mhm.
Then there's still the other, other piece that is set aside for convention center
Right,
type stuff.
right.
Yeah.
Good. This is good to
What
see.
years might you suggest in the CIP the parking situation, the paving?
I think short term, it probably needs a slurry seal and restripe. I think will buy us 3 or 4 more years, so I think we're probably looking at 5-ish years before that'd be. But that's a tremendous expense because that parking lot is really just asphalt millings compacted.
Right.
So complete construction of a brand new parking lot there. So.
I'd sure, and it's not original thought I've had, but having made it a point at Tony's suggestion to come out, and it was a time where we had rain, so there were puddles and parking that was kind of too wet to use by people. That you think about doing a nice job on maybe I don't know, first row or two, or the area that's closest to the entrance. And that we all but give up on a fully paved parking lot and maybe go with, I don't know, crushed rock, some sort of a surface that's certainly less expensive but yet maintainable and suitable. Anyway, I know that's down the
Down the
roadways,
road,
but
yeah.
that's kinda
I think it'd be much more palatable money-wise, and I think it would be a crushed rock or whatever over a lot of it, with a nice asphalt for some of it, would probably be a consumer-liked parking lot as well.
And I've participated in those events where, yeah, if you're there in the early session, you get the up close parking. It's usually nice. If you get there a little later, you're in the grass, or you're in some other, could be rocks or whatever the case may be. But we can address that at another time. So thank you. Any other questions for Justin or staff or anybody?
I move to approve the contract with A&A Builders for the replacement of the Fun Valley bleachers, including the I forget which alternate two, for the amount of $741,044, and authorize the mayor to sign all necessary documents.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dave
Yes.
Pyrus Carvalho?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes. Next item.
Just keep
Item
going.
8C, consider bid
break?
results for 2019 street improvement
okay.
program.
I can tell Tony was up here. He was a little taller than I am. So. Jeff Peterson, Director of Engineering. Last Tuesday, we opened bids. Actually, we had 5 bids for the Phase 4, what we call the Phase 4 Main Street Reconstruction Project. This is the last portion in the north portion of town, which roughly goes from 13th Avenue to 5th Avenue, kind of fills in that last space. And it's similar to the previous projects in that it includes water line replacement, some storm sewer work, of course curb and gutter and sidewalk improvements, and some traffic signal work at 5th and Main and 9th and Main, and just minor improvements at 11th and Main. So the low bid we had was $3,543,173.43 from Volkswagen Construction LLC. They were the contractor that did the previous portion, the Phase 3 portion.
Okay.
So it's the same contractor,
Same contractor.
as the last one that was completed from 17th to 13th. And we had I think our product there was pretty good, and we had good coordination going through that. The bids were below the engineer's estimate, and I thought we had pretty competitive bids with, on a $3.5 million project, only about $22,000 difference between the low 2 bidders. So, so I think we have a pretty fair price for the project going forward. The final completion date, though there's some intermediary completion things that have to happen too, is April 30th of 2021. That's just if things get late next year, they'll complete the paving or the mill and overlay portion of the project in the spring. So it's just to give them that little bit of option if we have weather problems or other problems kind of coming through the whole next year. Because this is a pretty long section. This is a little bit longer than we've done of late. We've done it in 3 or 4 block increments, and this is, 8 or 9 blocks kind of there, and plus 1 intensive block from 5th to 6th, which is more of the downtown field portion. So.
We did allow that stipulation on the last run, and then they left it for several months, and then it wasn't ready by the fair, and then we had to scramble.
Right.
So is there any way we could put the date we want it completed by, and then have some kind of change order issued if they weren't able to make that date?
And we have that lateral ability to kind of discuss with them if weather comes up and things like that.
Yeah, I don't know if you all remember that, but I think it was 7th to 30th. When?
Oh,
not 7th.
Oh, no,
Well, we did
23rd to 30th?
23rd
23rd to 30th, I'm sorry.
Probably, yeah.
Where we had that extended timeline for them to complete it. And so they just basically left for several months to go do somebody else's job. And then the promise that section be completed before the state fair wasn't met.
I think the issue was that they broke for the fair.
They broke for the fair. Yeah, that's what they did.
Because they were gone for longer than
you actually lose a month because of the fair, because it takes a month.
Yeah.
It takes a couple of weeks to get ready for it, then the 2 weeks, and then another week to kind of get everything set back up and going.
They originally, I remember this conversation when we approved that bid a couple years ago. They were originally supposed to have that completed by the fair. I know we ended up doing some more sidewalk work.
I don't think so.
I think the original conversation was that they would either be done or break. And open up.
Which they did.
And that was part of the frustration, is because we made them leave. They went and did some other work, and it took them a while to get back. Had they been able to, and they were fairly well along the way on that. And I remember they opened that street up, and there wasn't any real construction issues with that at that point.
That was a tough section because there's so many driveways, so you'd have to do one driveway, get it opened up, and then do the other driveway. So the timing is difficult when you're kind of under.
And this portion is well
traffic.
south of the fair, and
I don't really have those stipulations set up in this project
Yeah.
with respect to the fair, because we're getting.
Well, and I'm not concerned about the fair per se on this particular stretch. I'm more concerned about the businesses and the residences that are impacted for that
And we
extended period of time.
We actually have met. Well, we had a public meeting, and we have actually went door to door to all the businesses up and down that area.
Okay.
so far. And we're going to do some communication like we did on the last one, more of a email blast to each of those each week,
Yeah.
so they kind of know what's going on. So
I'm not sure we had better communication on a project than VOTS on that last section with the business owners. They were very much involved with communicating every day what's going to happen. And this company, I think, that proved that they had people on the job a lot. I mean, it wasn't a period of time where people were leaving and no work going on. So I think we'll see the same success this section that we did on the last one,
Yeah.
Midtown section.
Well, I'm thrilled with the bids. I'm thrilled that we had more than 2 companies submit bids, and that really seemed to work in our favor. But I'm just a little concerned about that lengthy timeline. We could have.
well, it's double the time. I mean, double the length of the last one. So we have to
Yeah.
about double the length to get it done. If we would have split it up into 2 phases, we might have been able to complete it for sure in one construction period.
Okay.
Jeff, I'm just curious, as a sidebar, go to 17th and Main, and with the torrential rains that we've had this spring and summer and so on, what is your level of satisfaction to the drainage and so on at 17th and Main? Do we still have some?
We'll still have some problems because
We still
we
have
did
some
some
problems?
work on 17th and Main ahead of the time. So if we did get the next phases of our stormwater master plan moving forward, it was already built a little bigger just at that location that we'd connect into. So it may have provided some minor improvements as far as drainage in that area for right now, but really the long-term it's built enough so we don't have to tear out any of that intersection and connect to it.
When downstream.
The downstream
capacity
capacity
is
still the
improved.
same. So
Yeah.
so we really it's just in an effort not to redo some work that we've just started. You know, I mean, and redoing a whole intersection. So that's kind of a phased thing. So I think it's working okay. But
You
I
think
mean,
it's working okay?
There's
Yeah.
still a lot of improvements that could happen. So.
Bid participation was up. Do you think it has to do with the timing of this particular?
I do. Originally, the goal was to get this bid earlier this year, but we weren't quite ready. And then also, a number of the contractors had indicated they were filled up for the summer. So this kind of gives them a chance to get some of the utility work going this fall and potentially do some concrete work, and then have a whole full construction season next year to move the concrete work and the paving work. So I think that helped out. So this is the majority of the work will probably happen next year. So
Yeah, next year.
So this is kind of filling their schedules for next year.
Perfect.
Jeff, the signal at 9th and Main is described as a pedestrian signal. Does that mean it'll only activate when, as a pedestrian, I push a button
That
at
is
the?
correct.
Okay,
That
because
is
now
correct.
it's activated by vehicles.
It
that
is
come to-
vehicles on the side streets right now. So, and we had discussed that in a study session that we were hoping that would be an option. And at the time, you guys gave the direction that would be okay to move that way.
So it's going to be pedestrian activated only?
Correct.
Okay. And I vaguely remember that, and I'm glad we're going that way. Why do we even have a signal there at all? Do we have enough
the signal's
pedestrian-
been there a long time. so-
Councilman Soldner wants that signal left, so that's why.
Well, if she wants it left, she ought to be here.
Well, the library
Well, the
is
library-
right there, and so you have a lot of
There is
kids.
some
that-
pedestrian traffic in that area
No, there's
across
a
the street
school.
with the college.
Okay,
across
okay,
the
so it's connected
street
to
and
the
things like that,
library.
too.
Okay.
I'm just kidding about Nancy, but she was
She does.
concerned when it was out of service for a while.
She was a big proponent of that.
Okay.
I'll say that.
And isn't that still a temporary signal?
Well,
At
it
9th
was
and Main?
temporary in that we just got it back to operating, so we could get this portion going next. So
But
yes, it is. For the most part, there is temporary parts to that.
But
Part
that
of
was
it's
an
temporary
issue
and
of
part it's-
AT&T
right,
cut
yeah.
something there,
Yeah.
and it sat for months trying to
Oh.
get them to figure out
Right.
what they need to do, but that's all.
Correct.
So now we're just gonna leave it until we.
Until we get into the pricing.
Yeah.
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 So we will have a little bit of education to do or whatever, acclimating of vehicle drivers at that
Yeah, and
intersection.
it will be similar to some of the ones around the college, what they call a hawk system, but it's the ones that kind of go overhead, so they're in the traffic lanes,
Mhm.
so they know that they'll need to stop. So
Right, but I mean,
that is correct.
coming from the side street, as a vehicle, I will not trip the thing to change.
Correct.
Yeah.
There'll just be stop signs there. so
It'll be stop signs that.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So,
All right.
so it's
How
not,
would you make
not
a
that they
left
have
turn
free
if
will
the
to go
light is
anywhere,
on?
but there'll be stop signs on the side
It's the
streets.
Wild West
Which
out
like
here.
we did temporarily before, when we were having problems with that anyway.
Okay.
so.
The signals will only face north and south on Main Street.
Correct.
Yeah, gotcha.
Okay.
Perfect.
Good questions. So, but yeah, I do recommend that we do accept the bids and authorize the mayor to sign the contract with Volkswagen Construction LLC. Again, the amount is $3,543,173.43. So that's a mouthful, but. Oh, I didn't say actually how it was getting funded. I'm sorry. I was looking at my information. The water line replacement portion is actually going to be funded out of the water line reserve, so that's funded separately, and then the rest of the project will be bonded, and we have some bond proceeds from the previous project that will be applied to this, and I can't remember exactly the amount. 430,000
Oh, great.
from previous bonds will be applied to this, so. So anyway, sorry, got ahead of myself.
No, thank you for catching that, bringing it up.
Well, then I move to approve awarding the bid to Volkswagen Construction LLC in the amount of $3,543,173.43, subject to compliance with all legal requirements, and authorize the mayor to sign all necessary documents.
I would second that, but I also have a question unrelated to this motion,
Okay.
but for future thinking in our CIP program, when might the South Main Street beautification or streetscape program be considered by the staff and presented to us in a future year CIP?
That's a good question. It's probably.
It's in the CIP.
It is in the CIP, isn't it?
How far out? I don't know.
How far out?
I don't remember South Main.
Is it
2022.
2022?
What's it for? I mean, that one is.
Avenue C to Cary Park.
Oh.
2.9 million. I'm not sure what, I mean, that's probably more of a streetscape project.
I don't. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not, I mean, it'd be a continuation of the streetscape, and we've talked about that for years. And,
We have.
but.
There probably have to be some other discussions community-wide to kind of get.
Yeah.
For sure.
Get
Get some
things
input on what they want
organized
that to
and
look
things
like.
that. Correct.
Well, I just, for the record, like to suggest that we accelerate our discussion on that topic in the future for future budget considerations to ahead of 2022 and see where that might take us.
I'd be in favor of that.
Yeah, a lot of light was shined
Yep,
on
there
that
sure was.
area
Absolutely,
recently,
yep.
and some promises were made, so promises need to be kept.
Absolutely, yeah.
So, I agree.
Sorry to interrupt the motion. I second the motion, but just raise that question.
You got a week, Jeff. Figure it out.
With that being said, Linda, would you please call the roll?
Deckent?
Yes.
Dave
Yes.
Pyros de Carvalho?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes. Can we all make it through the last 2-3 items without a break? Okay, very fine. Next item, if you would.
Item 8D, consider 2020 budget.
There was a great deal of discussion during the first portion of it. I'm not going to preclude that. So if there is anything that needs to be discussed at this time, or if a motion based on the previous discussion is warranted, I'll accept either.
I would move to approve the 2020 budget as proposed.
I'll second, but I might just invite anybody else. I mean, would you like to invite, if there is other comments, people who didn't?
We could, I mean, that was partially during the public
Okay.
hearing, but oh, we got a thumbs up.
Mhm.
Let the record show. But again, it has been invited, so is there anybody who wants to add to the discussion that we had earlier? Okay, seeing none. Did you second?
I did second.
You did second.
Thank you.
It has been moved and seconded. Please call the roll.
Deckent?
I've given my reasons in our previous discussion and vote no.
Dave Line?
Yes.
Pyros de Carvalho?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes. And that's enough, right? Yeah, okay. I thought Nancy was going to put us in a pickle again or something.
We need 4 votes. We didn't tell you that, did we?
Yeah. Super majority or something, yeah.
What can I say?
What can I say?
I have to hold off until Nancy gets back.
That's right. Very good. Simple majority works for clarification.
It does.
Just like put that out, the inside joke, whatever. Okay.
Manager was trying to get me to be worried about it.
Right. Very good. Brings us to the next item, which is report of city officials. Council, I'll start with Jade.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to commend Greg DeGarmo and Adam Wooten for hustling to get the temporary stoplight up at 30th and Lucille, and also give a big thanks to Bretson Young for giving us some funds to make that happen. Also wanted to commend Chief Hooper and his team. I think we all read the article about our crime rate going in the right direction, which is down. Lots of work to still be done, but thank you to you and your team. And wanted to know if we had any updates from USGS or any kind of input on the earthquake situation, or if we need to wait to have that conversation until later.
We don't have any, no.
Okay. That's all I had.
Very good. Steve?
Nothing, thank you.
John?
Nothing this morning.
Same thing, and I mentioned it to Chief Beer the other day, but what a great job they did for the fundraising and school supplies.
Yeah.
Chief Hooper, same as what Councilman Jade said. Great job on the trending down, aim low, so that going that direction. That's all I had as well. City Manager?
The only thing I was going to mention, and I need to get the date, but I think we're talking about maybe a study session, joint study session with the Housing Commission, September 9th, September 10th, which is a Tuesday, tentatively, but that, we haven't checked your calendar, so just we want to make sure before we schedule that it's good for you guys. That'd be, I think we're looking at 8 o'clock in the morning on the 10th, and we're not sure of a location yet.
Did you say housing or planning?
Housing. Going to talk about the rental registration program.
I'm fine with that date. What does everyone else's look like?
Works for me.
I've got an afternoon, but we usually
We should be done
load
by
those
then.
in the date, in the morning, don't we? Yeah, okay. Hopefully, right?
And that's all I had, Mayor.
Very good. Okay, I guess that's it. Then I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
And seconded, please call the roll.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dave
Yes.
Tyros de Carvalho?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you all for sticking with us.
Thanks, Angela.
Hey, Dave. I didn't know who that was, so I thought maybe he was another candidate we didn't know about. That's why I asked if anybody else wanted input.
I got you.
Do you have a male candidate?